Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining the Sage Intacct Product Tour for Growing SaaS Companies. My name is David Apple. I'm head of the SaaS and software vertical here at Sage Intacct, and joining me is John Flum, our principal sales engineer. John brings a fantastic background, and he was previously a finance practitioner, so he understands and relates to what your day in the life looks like, and is also going to share with you a fantastic way we could change and improve what your day in the life looks like today. We've had the great fortune to interview hundreds of our customers, and it's shown 4 big megatrends that are likely affecting you and how we design the product to make your life easier. First off, the move from on-premise to cloud. Second, the transition from being transactional minded in how you run the business into thinking about the entirety of the relationship and subscription. But then underneath that, financially in your revenue life cycle, transitioning from thinking about the world via sales orders, like some other cloud financials force you to do, and they're starting to think about being a native contract option. And your entirety of the contract relationship all being managed in one big object. And this transitions for you into cash flow from being reactive and just invoice driven in your billing into being proactive and have all of those transactions tie back to the contract master, which allows you to be even more advanced in your cash flow, which all the impacts that it has to DSO, cash flow, and revenue recognition. We worked with our board and what they guide us on what a great company looks like. On the left-hand side, qualitative inputs. On the right-hand side, quantitative outputs. And that there's a lot that goes into culture with leadership. There's a lot that goes into product with differentiation, strategic modes. There's a lot that goes into sales and marketing and community with your platforms and ecosystems, and then getting everybody marching the same way. And the best way to do that is to get data to people, so it's not opinion or conjecture, but it's information that everybody can share and think about. Classic outputs on what the 5 C's, the best of 5 C's are out there. Share revenue growth, your MRR, EBITDA, keeping churn down, running a real good unit economics, what your CLTV and CAC ratio look like, and doing all this in a real capital efficient way so you maximize the cash that you have on hand. And when you do this right, you're able to produce this beautiful dashboard. This is what we empower you to do by running this great financial process. You get this digital board book with the core SaaS metrics you can see that are on the top. CMRR, ARR, second row down, churn, both on a customer level and a revenue level, the amount of renewal that you got out there, both in the kind of trigger-based as well as the graphical view, so that everyone in the company can see the data, which allows you to move from arguments over who's right into we've got the data, so let's now have a shared consciousness in how we're interpreting this and make our decisions so we pivot faster, so we maneuver against our competition better. So we know where to put extra dollars into either product or customer success or whatever area may be. That's the decisions we want to get help you as the finance leader be able to provide to the company, because that's where the real insights and the fun part of the job is. And here is how we do it. It's right there in the middle, the big shiny green button, the contract master, the contract object. We'll help you take in the data from Salesforce, from ourselves, from perhaps in-house tracking system that you put in place, and manage all of those transactions against the entirety of that contract relationship. Doing this and having them that put in with what are your billing use cases against the item masters that you have allows you to automate billing across a wide swath of subscription scenarios to be able to do the add-ons and upsells, and hopefully not too much downsell, but we can do it for you. And then at the line item level, automate the revenue recognition and the expense amortization, which is a big part of having you be compliant with ASC 606. And when you do this, because you've got that contract object in there, that's what lets you just see into the future on understanding, based upon the term length of the contract you have, what is the billing forecast, the revenue forecast, and the cash forecast. And the beautiful thing about us is we do this, or we're special in how we do it, that all the subscription billing vendors are limited, that they only help you with the billing. They don't help you with the actual general ledger and all the financial reporting that you've got out there. Similarly, other cloud financial products are forced because the order master is the core of their suite. that they force you to think if you're going to do contracts that it's getting pushed out to an extension outside the system, which creates even more of a conundrum and complexity in how you manage the data and thus the reporting, which doesn't eliminate the problem that you're trying to solve. We thought a lot about this in our product, a lot of great customer feedback and investor feedback. That's what led to this layout that we've got here. And over time, we've seen this SaaS process automation lifecycle happen with the stage on the left-hand side, time on the bottom. It has some nuances and change if you're high ACV or high volume or another model. But in general, this is directionally correct that there's a set of processes you're going to mature over the period of time in a certain order. And we can help you through all these into IPO and well past IPO. We've done it for many firms. So we've got 3 chapters that we're going to help you with in all this that John's going to lay out with you. First, quote to cash, showing you the Salesforce integration. Chapter number 2, contract to cash workflow with how we help you manage into ASC 606. And then third, one of my favorite parts, I just shared a moment ago, is having all this automation then lead into having great SaaS metrics and GAAP reporting via the digital board book in our reports. So with that, we're going to transition over to the product tour. Get ready, strap in, we're real excited, let's go. Quote to cash with Salesforce integration. So to set the stage a little bit around this is, if in building your true quote to cash, as your company grows through that life cycle we just talked about, the volume and complexity increases. And manual efforts can get in the way and really slow down handling, being able to deal with that volume, which is why we built this integration. So it allows sales and finance to work together to get that complete contract and revenue and cash life cycle that we just laid out. We're going to have a little figurative of the narration behind this of a great SaaS leader, Emma. And Emma's going to be managing her opportunities in Salesforce. So when that deal's closed, by using us, that contract information gets automatically sent to us in Sage Intacct, so that finance can know what came off the order and do the billing and the revenue recognition processes. Again, having that automated, but being able to put in checks and balances where they want, and sending that detail back to Salesforce so that Emma, when logging in, can see the status of her customer accounts in Salesforce. Here's another pictorial graphic representation on the left-hand side in Salesforce, that opportunity object turned into a contract object, and then moving into the Sage Intacct contract object, and then underneath that, additional add-ons and upsells occurring, and thus ability to be able to handle the billing and the revenue. So with that, I'd like to transition over to John and showing it come alive. So John, take it away.
Thank you, David. As you were laying out, and as we're going to go through and see in product today, sales folks manage their opportunities in Salesforce, and when the deal is won, new subscription contracts automatically make their way to Intacct, where the finance team can pick them up and start the work on downstream processes, such as billing and revenue recognition. This is facilitated through the Intacct Salesforce integration, which is a managed application between the two companies, going back a long history between us, going back to 2006. And it is a managed application on the Salesforce App Exchange. So what this means is easier administration and maintenance for you over time as your organization grows, scales, and changes. So up front, getting set up and running on the Intacct Salesforce integration is just as easy as configuring both sides. So there's a component of the configuration that takes place in Salesforce, allowing you to tailor the integration to how you might be using Salesforce specifically in your organization. What are the critical points at which you would say perhaps opportunities at a closed won stage are those that are ready to be synchronized over to Intacct? What other key pieces of data are important to you in your Salesforce instance? Are you managing your renewals out of Salesforce as well as your new sales and upsells and add-ons that we also want to go ahead and synchronize and move between Intacct and Salesforce? So there's the component of it related to Salesforce, again allowing you to leverage Salesforce's flexibility and tailor your sales cycles to how it is that you engage with your customers. But then there's also the Intacct side of things as well. So there's another configuration aspect to it on the Intacct side that gets into the key pieces of data that are going to go back and forth. Things like your accounts, your contacts, and very importantly, your products. So as we'll see, Intacct and Salesforce working together to bring this automation of data flow back and forth between the two systems and taking into account the flexibility that needs to exist. Perhaps there are critical elements related to certain objects in your Salesforce instance that you want to bring over to Intacct beyond the basics of name and address. You can establish those custom mappings in real time between your Intacct instance, your Salesforce instance, and then designate which way the data should flow. Is this information that's coming from Salesforce to Intacct? Is it information that's going to be managed by the team working in Intacct that should be updated in Salesforce? Or is it something that potentially might be managed bidirectionally and whomever is responsible for managing the record in their particular system of comfort is doing that, knowing that it's mapped back and forth to the two critical systems in the quote-to-cash cycle. One of the critical components to that, obviously, is the products and services that you sell. And so as these are mapped to Intacct and Salesforce, it's not just about making sure that we have a reciprocal record, but it's how do we also help automate some of the downstream aspects of it. So as our products are set up and established in Intacct, we can be mindful of the downstream flows for those particular aspects of billing, revenue recognition, etc. So as we've set up, in this case, our item 110, our extension pack, that might be something we add to our deals. Part of that setup of that item is to go ahead and start to designate, how do we typically bill this? How do we typically recognize this? This allows these values to default in, be managed by the users throughout the cycle, whether that's the sales or sales ops team in Salesforce, whether it's the finance team as this transaction lands in Intacct, but the ability for these to further enhance the workflow on both sides. So as we see here, our extension pack, noting billing for a year, we would see that same thing reflected if we were to look at a particular opportunity in Salesforce showing the use of that particular data. So an opportunity for Dickinson PLC that might have that particular product on it would reflect those values as they were designated in the setup, mapped over with the ability to change it. So that billing template being effective for 1 year, but available to be changed if it were to make sense to. So what this does is it allows those users who are primarily working in Salesforce, managing those opportunities, associating those opportunities with contracts, and those contracts ultimately becoming subscription records over in Intacct to be managed for the billing, financial, recording, reporting activities, to do so with a high level of automation, high level of oversight, and visibility across the organization. Now, one other key element that the Salesforce Intacct integration brings to it throughout the course of this is the notion of collaboration. So as different users might be looking at different components within Salesforce. So in this case, we have another rep in our organization, Max, who's taking a look at his account for Burlington Textiles. We start to see the visibility that we get across both platforms. The ability for Max to look at Burlington and see the opportunities, see the contracts that have been created, and then also Intacct feeding the information back as we go through the process of invoicing and receiving payments from our customers. So the ability for these users to see and work with this data. So Max might actually go ahead and pull up that invoice record as it was fed back from Intacct. He has the ability to obviously see the status, go ahead and take a look at the details of this invoice, or if needed, even print a copy of it that he can send out to his customer if in fact they were to need one, or he needed it to uplift a conversation that he's having about status of the account, opportunities for upsell or cross-sell. It now becomes a self-service prospect for that rep to do themselves. But they also might have some collaboration with others in the organization, and this can happen across platform as well. So if we were to go ahead and take a look, we might see that Emma and Max have had a conversation about this invoice where Max lets Emma know that the customer requested a copy and he sent it over, taking care of it directly out of Salesforce. Emma might see this and participate in this through Salesforce, but she's also able to do so directly through her Intacct Collaborate function. So we would see all these collaborative messages viewed back and forth between Salesforce and Intacct, allowing both sides of the organization to work together seamlessly, and work collaboratively to get the job done better and faster. David, I'll turn it back to you.
Fantastic. That's a great layout on how that comes together. And for those of you, thank you for listening as we transition off of what John just shared on quote-to-cash integration to now to Chapter 2, contract to cash, and including how that we enable you to handle your ASC 606 revenue recognition. So on contract-based accounting, there's these three things that we talked about, the megatrends at the beginning. The shift from being order-based in your accounting to contract-based in your accounting. That reflects the move from thinking about things just in terms of transactions to ongoing customer relationships, both in how you bill, but then also in how you support and how you bring them customer success and the value that they've got. And by being contract-centric in your accounting, makes it easier for you to see what your customers have bought and to recognize that revenue over time, compliance with ASC 606, which in turn then gets you the proper valuation as you're going out and fundraising. We're going to continue our narrative with Emma, because in Emma's case, in this metaphor that John's showing in the product, is managing pricing and billing used to be very challenging and time-intensive because it was all done manually. But now Emma will be able to use Sage Intacct's flexible price list to create these pricing models across several different types of use cases that she may want. In this particular case, she assigns the price list to a contract, and the system ensures that the invoicing is accurate because we've set up the billing against that item master, and then the rev rec against the billing in that item master. So let's jump in, and we're going to transition back over to John here for Chapter 2. Let's see how Emma handles pricing and billing in more detail. John?
Thanks again, David. So as we go ahead and pick things back up, what we'll see is the Intacct processes for helping manage subscription and contract-based organization. So Sage Intacct's native contract object allows companies to make the switch from a transaction-based workflow to an object-based workflow. This is especially important to companies subject to new guidelines under ASC 606, which might require more stringent tracking of deferred revenue and recognized revenue across different designations than previous. Perhaps you need to take a deeper look at your unbilled versus your billed and your paid statuses. How much of our revenue is substantiated by cash versus just how much of it's out there in outstanding invoices? How much of our deferred revenue is substantiated by cash versus just simply what we've invoiced? Or how much of that have we simply not even billed yet and is sitting in a backlog? Furthermore, using a contract object to manage your lead to cash workflow gives you unprecedented visibility into these designations for each individual component of the contract. So being able to see perhaps a subscription element from a setup or services engagement, an add-on component that might come in over time, a usage element that's being billed in arrears as your customers process a volume of transactions or use certain levels of service. And you need to track and manage that. All of this simultaneously records all the relevant transactions into two separate books in Intacct, side by side, managing today's accounting guidance, as well as the treatments under future ASC 606, side by side, and the ability to dual report, the ability to see that information in real time comparatively as you go ahead and navigate the transition from ASC 605 to 606. How this really starts to take shape is if we were to have, for example, a contract in Intacct, and this contract may have come from a CRM system such as Salesforce through something like the Salesforce Intacct integration. But the key here is this is the one place where we're going to go ahead and manage our relationship with that customer. Whether we're looking at the initial sale, whether we're looking at add-ons that might have happened during the initial term, or it's Intacct tracking renewals off of that information in one place, you don't have to string together multiple orders, multiple transactions by yourself anymore. This is all going to be contained underneath the contract outlining the key elements of who we're dealing with, the terms of the agreement. As you'll note across the top, tracking some both high-level as well as detailed financial information, as we'll see shortly, about where are we in terms of contract value, invoicing, cash receipt, outstanding amounts as well. All of that being driven by the detail that's coming from the different individual elements of this. So as we scroll down and take a look at our contract lines, for example, we can note all of the different products or services that have been made components of this contract. And each of these may have individual treatments as you've agreed with your customers, perhaps for how you're going to bill it, when you're going to deliver it, when are you going to start recognition on these items. What's the nature of pricing? Is it a fixed price? Is it something perhaps that's driven by, again, quantities and usages? Perhaps those quantities and usages have tiered or stepped up pricing. The more you use, the less you pay type of agreements. All of that automated within the billing price lists associated to the contracts, and then the setup of the individual items. Perhaps you have services engagements as part of it where you need to bill the respective time and materials from your service organization. Each one of these different elements underneath this contract allows us the flexibility to do just that and to see those types of information. It also allows us to manage separately the activities of billing from recognition of revenue. So we may note here under each of these individual items, as they come in and land in Intacct, automation around billing or revenue might kick in. From a billing standpoint, we may bill this one time. Intacct's still going to create and manage a schedule for when we're going to actually, in fact, bill that. That template or that schedule will actually translate to a setup of specific dates and line items, in this case a one-time event of the $90,000. But perhaps that information is going to be recognized in or over a different term, I should say. Perhaps we're going to look at that as on a straight line basis for current revenue guidance. So that $90,000 we're going to bill, we're going to go ahead and recognize over the life of the course of the subscription. Maybe that line item would have some different treatment if we were going ahead and looking at ASC 606 guidance. So instead of a straight 7,500, we might be looking at more of a daily delivery because that's the guidance we have on the adoption of 606 for this particular line item. So each individual element of the contract bringing with it the ability to separate the revenue components from the billing components. And again, some things might be related to different elements perhaps of service engagements that are tied to getting this subscription up and running for your customer. You can go ahead and associate this particular contract with a project. And now your services engagement teams are out there tracking their time, tracking their expenses as they go ahead and deliver those different individual services. We might have quantity-based items designating that we're going to go ahead and wait for some usage elements to come in against that contract. So we can go ahead and designate different billing amounts. How is it that we're going to go ahead and manage the different components of each individual line item as it lands on the contract within Intacct. We'll see in a moment how this all comes together for the functions of things such as invoicing. But while we're sitting here, we'll see that all of those different events are going to be tracked for us in detail underneath the contract. So if we were to pull up, for example, the transaction history of this contract, what we'll note is the different events that occur from the creation to the invoicing, perhaps to recognition, to receipt of payment. All of these different events within Intacct, all generating individual journal entries to track what was the activity that occurred and what should the accounting impacts of that be. Not only is it tracking how much did I bill or how much did I recognize, but automating those movements between those unbilled, billed, and perhaps paid buckets as well. So at any point in time, not only can you see the transaction details, but if you were looking at this information at a higher level, it can all be summarized for you as well. So always giving you that snapshot of where am I on this contract, and looking again at the contract as a whole to say, under the guidance of ASC 605 in Journal 1, where am I from an unbilled, billed, and paid standpoint for both my sales revenue and my deferred revenue? Seeing that potentially for each individual line item as it designates down below. And then the same information will be available for purposes of side-by-side ASC 606 reporting as well. All of these entries are automated throughout the process. At no point are you taking spreadsheet data that you've been managing offline and translating that into journal entries. The idea behind the contract object, the automations of billing templates and revenue templates, is to really put you in the position of managing to the exceptions. At any point in time that you need to make edits or modifications to the terms of the contract, you can simply step into the middle, perhaps change the timing of revenue events, perhaps put things on hold and resume them, update billing schedules for revised agreements, etc. Invoices as they are created, and we'll see the process momentarily, also a part of the historical element of the contract. So we'll see here that we've had a large upfront invoicing for getting our subscription started, and then some periodic invoicings over time. Again, highlighting that ability for different terms to exist underneath the individual contract elements that might go ahead and actually exist out there. Now, as we take a look at how does this translate to some of those events like invoicing and revenue recognition, we'll go ahead and take a look at our generate invoice process for this particular contract. So if we were to take a look, for example, at perhaps we want to generate our invoices as of the end of November, and in our case, we'll go ahead and we will filter ourselves down just to that particular contract that we were working with. So we have our Vertex subscription contract. So what Intacct will do based on this information supplied to the invoicing process is allow you to go out and see what's coming through and available to bill. So as we go ahead and initiate the preview for this particular contract and all of its different elements underneath it, Intacct will go out, take a look at those different billing schedules, perhaps take a look at the projects and see if there's any time or associated expenses to be invoiced. Look and see if any usage information was uploaded for quantity-based items or transaction-based items that need to go ahead and be billed. And so we'll see here in this case we have a total of $15,932.48 in total to be invoiced. We can drill down on that and go ahead and get an even deeper breakdown. As we go ahead and drill down into that, Intacct shows us where all those different billing components are coming from. So all of this in one place, regardless of what the source is. A subscription-based item that we're simply managing to a schedule versus usage items where we went ahead and perhaps uploaded individual quantities. And those quantities bounced off of individual pricing models. So in this case, we see some tiered pricing coming into play. So for our total number of units that were supplied, 50 of them were included in the base price of the subscription, and the additional items above that 50 are priced out at their respective values, 9 at 100, 10 at 75, 20 at 50. We see that our services team has been actively working on the project to get our customer up and running or perhaps add in a new custom element for them. So we see that Nick and Chuck have been out there expending time across the billing period, and that needs to be passed through and priced and invoiced. Perhaps they incurred some expenses while actually going ahead and delivering those services. So all of these different elements simply here and available for us to go ahead and quickly and easily turn into an invoice out to our customer, automating the workflow further, sharing that information perhaps with Salesforce or CRM organization, and of course making all of the associated entries for invoicing and revenue along the way. As you think about all of that information on an individual contract, it's not uncommon for folks to start thinking about, looking at particular individual elements of all of your contracts across time. So perhaps thinking about forecasting. Well, how do I know when I'm going to bill all of my different customers? How do I know what revenue I'm going to recognize? How can I perhaps, see that information for today's revenue guidance of ASC 605 versus ASC 606? This is all going to be available for you in individual reports that can be delivered out into dashboards. So taking a look and seeing, when are we expecting to recognize the revenue for all of the different components and different contracts, sorting across Intacct's variety of dimensions. We're looking at this perhaps by customer, by product, by territory, by sales rep, any of those individual values. So forecasting revenue, perhaps forecasting billing. When is it that we're going to send our invoices out the door and generate all these invoices to our customers? A critical item associated with that often gets lost in most of our competitive systems, the ability to actually forecast the cash to come in off those invoices. Based on our terms and based on the billing schedules we have, Intacct can go ahead and identify for us when we might actually expect to receive some of that cash as well. So being able to see and forecast that information for revenue, for billing, for cash receipts, being able to look at our transition from ASC 605 to ASC 606, and again, leveraging those Intacct dimensions. So not just seeing numbers at a high level on an income statement or balance sheet, but being able to actually take a look at and see, maybe the different components that make up our revenue. Being able to see side by side, 605, 606, how would we look after the transition versus under today's current accounting guidance. So all of this information driving off the automations within Intacct. Your users not being bogged down in day-to-day data, spreadsheets, uploads of journal entries, recreation of data, but simply managing to the exceptions. The Intacct contract object has all of the information underneath it about your individual subscriptions, the components of those subscriptions, and now your users are sitting there able to carry out their day-to-day job more easily and efficiently because they're now managing the events on a day-to-day basis. I need to bill. I don't need to go out and find out what to bill and then bill. A big difference between managing the events and managing the data. So those are all the key elements that the Intacct contract object and our ASC 606 and 605 treatments bring to the SaaS and subscription world: forecasting, insight, revenue recognition and billing automation, communication back and forth with your CRM system of record, and all done seamlessly and effortlessly. David, thank you. Turn it back to you.
It truly is fantastic, everything you just laid out for everyone, John, on how these pieces come together and how you automate managing the contract and how it's different from the firms that only do subscription billing that lack the ability to have the general ledger, or only do quoting and lack the ability, the general ledger, or even some of the other cloud financial products that are out there that are stuck in being order-centric. Having this complete solution ties the whole kit together, and then for you, our listener, making your life so much easier by getting you out of manual work. And that last example John just said, trying to figure out what to bill and then billing it, to allowing the system to bill it with putting your own governance and checks and balances in there, and producing the reports that you need to see at the end. It's fantastic. Okay, let's transition over to Chapter 3, which is the SaaS metrics with the digital board book. This is that slide I showed up front. This is where it all comes together. By automating the processes upstream, you can count, and the fact that it's financial data, you can count on what you're seeing on the back end. So with our digital board book, you're able to see the SaaS metrics, just understand the health and performance of your subscription business. The beautiful thing here is it becomes a sense of shared consciousness that everyone in the company is seeing the same data, and then decision-making becomes even more fluid, because we'll allow you to automatically calculate some of the 5 C's that are out there: monthly recurring revenue, MRR, churn, customer acquisition costs, and much, much more. Let's get back to our narrative on Emma. Emma's using the digital board book, and she's able to answer the questions posed to her by her board of directors. She's got the access to the critical SaaS metrics at her fingertips. And not only her, but her extended team. And not only you, but your extended team of people that need this information. And so when you're pressed for detail, you can drill down and have the data behind your decisions as opposed to conjecture or opinion. This is when companies really start to sing. So John, we're going to transition back over to you to show this last and final chapter of the product tour.
All righty. So thank you again, David. As you were called out, the digital board book aggregates information from across all of your subscription contracts automatically, including new subscriptions, upgrades, downgrades, and cancellations. So you can spend more time digging into the numbers and gaining powerful insights instead of stressing out building inaccurate, out-of-date spreadsheets. We really believe that what this brings about dashboard-driven decision-making. right? Intact's digital board book, along with Intact's flexible and unprecedented dimension architecture and ways of looking at data, unlock information that was previously hidden. The world of dashboards should, of course, be able to tell us where we've been and where we are, right? Think about even your car today. It probably tells you how many miles per gallon you've been getting. But what's really important is how much further do you have to go, right? Where do I need to get to? Where am I heading? And as you think about translating that to the business, where are we? What have we booked? How are we doing managing our churn? How are we doing managing our customer acquisition costs? Being able to look at not just the dollars and cents information, but statistical information, being able to look at things like our customer movements, perhaps tracking number of users, number of seats sold, being able to look at things, statistical measures like payback in months. How quickly are we making our money back that we're expending in the sales cycle? The Intact Digital Board Book is bringing all of this automation directly to you. So it's not just about the information that you can pull off of your traditional GAAP financial statements, but as you think about that transition to the subscription economy and what that means for reporting and insights, it's no longer just about what do I have in revenue or what do I have in deferred revenue, because things like different cycles of managing revenue and invoicing with your customer agreements might go ahead and bring about important changes to that. Think about answering questions for folks, right? So now, you may be getting ready for your next board meeting and you anticipate questions about churn. The board perhaps wants to know, are there particular markets that you might be churning data in more than others? We can see here from a nice waterfall graph here that's breaking out all of our different components of revenue and CMRR from new to add-on to churn, with the ability for us to drill down and actually see that information. So as we go ahead and take a look at our churn information, we can see what are the components making up that churn? More importantly, though, to the board's question, are we doing better in certain markets or segments? Well, a quick and easy look down at this information tells us we're churning quite a bit in the small business segment. So Intact's Dimensions, working alongside with the Intact Digital Board Book, bring unprecedented visibility and insight to your business and doing it seamlessly, doing it in real time. This information is as up to date as the latest sale that was closed and won, whether that was a new sale, an upsell, a renewal, or unfortunately perhaps even a churn or non-sale. So Intact's Digital Board Book, bringing SaaS metrics to life for you across different performance cards, reports, graphing capabilities, as well as the rest of Intact's key dimensions. Right, as you take a look, Intact is flexible at how you want to look at your business. Are you driven by different territories or individual segments within the customers that you serve? Do you look at things based on market size or source of information? You'll see here Intact's ability to take the exact same values, right, and slice and dice that same information a variety of different ways. Right? These are simply examples that might be part of what we see in the traditional SaaS world, but take those things that are important to you and replace them here. If territory isn't how you look at things in this way, but you look at geographies more globally, that's fine. This is simply an example to what the capabilities are. So the Intact architecture for its flexible dimensions, the automation we bring through contract automation for managing subscription billing, subscription revenue, the insight that we give through the Digital Board Book, all completing the workflow for our SaaS customers, our SaaS and software subscription management-driven customers on the Intact platform, making them better every day. David, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. This is truly where it all comes together for you as finance practitioners by leveraging all the automation to give this kind of fluidity and insight to the rest of the business team. And again, big difference being it's coming off of the financials, which are audited, which are clean, as opposed to limited to just only off the bookings. And this is the big difference maker for us. So that's the end of the product tour. We wanted to wrap up with a few places you can get some more information if you're interested in learning more. Come to our website, www.intact.com, and download a trial. Or access one of our webinars to learn more information. You can also follow us at Sage Intacct or connect with us on Facebook Also, contact us directly. There's our 800 number, info@intact.com. We'll get one of our great team to follow up with you. John and I and the whole team would like to thank you for joining us for this product tour. We hope it answered the questions you might have and spurred your interest with learning more how we can help you scale up your business. Thank you very much. Please have a great day.